Today, I want to talk about the Matrix Trilogy, specifically the philosophical value that the Matrix Trilogy brings to its viewers. So, the Matrix has a lot of fight scenes and a lot of other interesting things going on, but I actually wanted to focus on the philosophy of the Oracle. The Oracle is a character that actually has about less than 15 minutes of screen time in the entire trilogy, but probably plays one of the most important roles in the entire film, um, or the three films themselves. And I really wanted to focus on what she was talking about because glossing over it in the middle of the movie, especially if you're only watching it one time, I don't think you're able to really pick up a lot of the deeper aspects of what she's saying. And I personally believe there's a lot of philosophical value in it, so I wanted to cover it. All right, so starting off in the first movie, um, Neo meets the Oracle for the first time. Morpheus has brought him to the Oracle so that she can, quote unquote, tell him exactly what he needs to hear. One of the first things that she says to Neo is she says that she would ask him to sit down, but she already knows that he's not going to anyway.
I'd ask you to sit down, but you're not going to anyway.
So, right off the bat, we're hit with the philosophical question of fatalism and whether or not what we're doing is already written in the stars and something that we can't change. So this is where we can kind of touch on a little bit of Jungian psychology, and there's many other psychologists that have talked about this. Just because you know what someone is going to do doesn't mean that they have no freedom. So a direct quote from Carl Jung says, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." So there are many things, many patterns that we have within ourselves that are already there. Whether we decided to put that pattern into place at a very young age and forget that we decided it, or it was there from a natural, instinctual point of view, those patterns are there nevertheless. As we become more conscious of these patterns, we can actually change the direction that we are going in. So there's a clear distinction between conscious and unconscious in this perspective. And that has value for us because we might be stuck in a pattern and we might be able to adjust after we become aware of that. But this is a process known as shadow work. This is a process of exploring the unconscious and achieving self-knowledge, which we're very much interested here on the Sage Mode channel. So the very next point that the Oracle makes is that certain reactions can be elicited or drawn out. She says that to not worry about the vase, at which point Neo looks around to see what vase she's talking about and knocks the vase over.
And don't worry about the vase.
What vase?
That vase.
So once again, this means that we have built-in patterns, and just because we're not aware of them doesn't mean that other people can't be aware of them themselves. So this isn't some far-fetched idea. This is the whole idea, let's say, in poker. Excellent poker players can perform actions that get other players to respond in a certain way so they can trap them in the game. A salesperson is trying to understand their client, trying to close the sale by reading their body language and trying to understand their psychology better than the person actually understands it themselves. I think it was Ford, the creator of the Ford Motor T, that said, if I asked people what they wanted, they'd tell me, horses. Well, I'm going to give them a car. And he was right. So it was the idea of knowing what the clients wanted better than they knew themselves. So once again, the Oracle accomplishes two things very quickly in this short time by showing that, yes, we also have these patterns that we're unconscious of, and people who are a bit more savvy or more aware of us than we are of ourselves can influence us. They can direct our actions.
How did you know?
Oh, what's really going to bake your noodle later on is Would you still have broken it if I hadn't said anything?
And this is important as we move on. So she points to a Latin phrase called temet nose. And she says that it means know thyself. And of course, what we just covered, that's the essence of what we're talking about. Once again, if you cover it too quickly, you may not pick up on the importance of this. And so, what does it mean to know something? What does it mean to know yourself? Just because someone tells you something about yourself, does that mean that you know it about yourself? Does it mean you know something at all? So, let's say you hear on the news that, there was a bombing in Iran and a bunch of people were rushed to the hospital. You don't know that the bombing actually happened, and you don't know how many people were hurt. But I would bet that there's a doctor in Iran that's running a hospital that knows exactly how many people got hurt, or at least he knows exactly how many people were rushed to the hospital, and all of the people doing surgery on all of those people that got hurt, they feel the pain. They know what's going on. They're actually there. For all you know, wherever you are, you may not have any clue what's going on, and anybody can say anything to you. So you have to kind of choose what you believe, because to achieve knowledge, there's only so many ways that you can do it. And we can turn to Carl Jung's Quaternity of Consciousness to understand what those ways are. So Jung would argue that you could achieve knowledge through your senses, obviously your sight, hearing, touch, etc. Your emotions. So if you feel angry, you at least know that you feel angry, and usually there's something happening to elicit that response. Your intuition, which I've talked about in previous videos, but won't go into here. But a lot of what Edward von Hartmann explored in Philosophy of the Unconscious in his book. And thinking. So that's like actually thinking something through, making deductions, inferences. So for example, you may be able to deduce from a scientific experiment that something is true. You used your senses to observe it, but you can use thought to play it out. Sort of like the Sherlock Holmes level of deduction. We can reach knowledge without actually seeing something firsthand.
You know what that means? It's Latin. Means know thyself. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. Being the one is just like being in love. No one can tell you you're in love, you just know it. Through and through. Balls to bones.
So, the Oracle proceeds to tell Neo about a choice that will end up revealing to him that he is the one.
Morpheus believes in you, Neo. And no one, not you, not even me, can convince him otherwise. He believes it so blindly that he's going to sacrifice his life to save yours.
What?
You're going to have to make a choice. In the one hand, you'll have Morpheus's life. And in the other hand, you'll have your own. One of you is going to die.
Now, she doesn't tell him that Neo is the one.
Okay. Now I'm supposed to say, that's interesting, but then you say,
But what?
but you already know what I'm going to tell you.
I'm not the one.
Sorry, kid. You got the gift, but it looks like you're waiting for something.
Which Neo ends up becoming the one anyway. So why would she not just come out and say that he's the one? Well, this is actually covered in the third movie. Because she actually knew that he was, quote-unquote, the one the entire time. So it begs the question of why not just come out and say it? But this is important. Keep it in mind for later. So the Oracle, in her closing, remarks that she once again knows exactly what Neo believes.
Don't worry about it. As soon as you step outside that door, you'll start feeling better. You'll remember you don't believe in any of this fate crap. You're in control of your own life. Remember?
That he doesn't believe in any of this fate crap anyway, and he can go on with his life knowing that, you know, none of this matters. There's no such thing as the one. And that's what Neo has chosen to believe. Does Neo know it? Maybe, maybe not, but that is what he has chosen to believe. And so we move on to the second movie, where we have another short interaction with the Oracle. So once again, the Oracle greets Neo the same way that she did the first time, acknowledging whether he wants to sit or stand.
Why don't you come and have a sit this time?
Maybe I'll stand.
Well, suit yourself.
I felt like sitting.
I know.
And this time, Neo's a little bit more prepared, and he says that, oh, I don't want to sit. And then he sits anyway. He resists it at first. So there's this sort of discomfort of someone knowing you. But once the knowing is realized, once you know that someone can see right through whatever facade that you have, the need to lie or the need to put up a facade is irrelevant. It doesn't matter anymore. And coming back to the idea of knowledge, I certainly believe that you can know a thing. But if you can know a thing, that means that there are ways to know those things, and there's better ways. You can refine the methods by which you achieve knowledge. Now, this is important because the onus is on us to refine our methods of how we ascertain knowledge. And if we sit around and do nothing about our senses, about our intuition, about how efficient our thinking is, and how we respond to our emotions in a healthy way, we will be able to be manipulated, we will be lied to, and be stuck in our own matrix, so to speak, forever. Many people will be able to manipulate us. Neo goes on to draw conclusions about the Oracle because he didn't know who the Oracle was in the first movie, and it turns out that she's a program, which is part of the Matrix, which poses a problem to Neo because that means that the Oracle could very well be manipulating him no differently than any other program in the Matrix is designed to do.
So, let's get the obvious stuff out of the way.
You're not human, are you?
And it's tough to get any more obvious than that.
If I had to guess, I'd say you're a program from the machine world. So is he.
So far, so good.
But if that's true, that could mean you are part of this system. Another kind of control.
Keep going.
I suppose the most obvious question is, how can I trust you?
Bingo.
So how in the world can he trust anything that the Oracle is telling him? And the Oracle acknowledges all of this because it doesn't matter if the Oracle says, I promise I'm not manipulating you. That's all irrelevant at this point because Neo will have to make a choice on whether or not he believes she's telling the truth. And the Oracle goes on to say that he can't know. He doesn't have the means to know. But rather, he'll have to make up his own mind.
It is a pickle, no doubt about it. Bad news is there's no way if you can really know whether I'm here to help you or not. So it's really up to you. Just have to make up your own damn mind to either accept what I'm going to tell you or reject it.
He'll have to choose what he believes. So notice right here a distinction between belief and knowledge. Sometimes we're put into a position where we're forced to believe. Consider the afterlife, for example. I can't go out and collect data on the afterlife, although there's actually been a huge scientific movement in gathering information on near-death experiences and the like, and there's a lot of evidence building up in that area. But suffice it to say, in my particular position and not having access to any of that information, I'm going to have to choose to believe what happens in the afterlife. I don't really have any way of knowing. So this is important that many things are like this in our lives, where we have to choose to believe. We have to choose to believe what the news is telling us, because we have no way of validating it. Now, we can choose to refine that knowledge, if we can, by cross-referencing, seeing what other sources say, and getting to the heart of the matter, but it's still difficult for us to really know. So finally, the Oracle makes a valuable distinction. Neo, like many of us, have already decided long ago what we are going to do. But Neo just doesn't understand why he has made that choice.
Candy?
You already know if I'm going to take it?
Wouldn't be much of an oracle if I didn't.
But if you already know, how can I make a choice?
Because you didn't come here to make the choice. You've already made it. You're here to try to understand why you made it.
So this is something where Freud comes into play. He says that a lot of the patterns that we have, a lot of the decisions that we have been made years ago. And quite possibly we've reached the point where we denied that we even made those choices or forgot that we made those choices. And now it's just part of our pattern. So for me, for example, I know that I'm going to go to work this coming Monday. But that's because, notwithstanding, other forces that would prevent me from doing so. But that's because I've already made that decision to. I don't need to remake the decision. I've already made the decision to go into work every day that I can. I've already made the decision to brush my teeth every day. And eventually that decision forms into a habit. And that habit takes less energy to upkeep because the decision that gets made, decisions do take energy. But the more you do it, the less energy you have to spend on it because it turns into a habit. And we can lose ourselves in these habits because we forgot that we ever made the decision to begin with. And a lot of this happens when we are kids. So, once again, it's the idea of not mistaking those forgotten decisions for a lack of freedom. And this is an important distinction to make. This fatalistic mentality that we believe that we're stuck in acting a certain way or believing a certain way is simply not true. The Biology of Belief, the book written by Dr. Bruce Lipton, talks a lot about this and a lot about reprogramming these habits if you're interested in looking into that. Okay, so now we move on to the third movie. And this is an interesting point that the Oracle makes in this short scene, is that no one can see beyond a choice that they don't understand.
Where is this going? Where does it end?
I don't know.
You don't know or you won't tell me?
I told you before, no one can see beyond a choice they don't understand. And I mean no one.
So what does that mean? So I know myself well enough to know how I'm going to respond to various stimuli in my environment. So if somebody is treating me like crap at work, I've already made the decision to remain calm and deal with it in a judicious way. I don't want to overreact and get myself in trouble at work. But that was a conscious choice that I've made, that I've embedded into a habit, so when that stimuli comes, I'm not caught off guard. So what happens when I come into a situation where I have an experience, but it's not something I've taken into account yet. It's not something I've even imagined yet. And I still respond because we're forced to act, right? Life doesn't, give you much time for rest. There's always situations popping up, different stressors popping up. And we are forced to respond in one way or the other, whether that means not doing anything about it or ignoring it, but we're responding nevertheless. So if we don't understand why we've responded or reacted, worse off, in the way that we have, we could never anticipate what's going to happen next. We can't predict what's going to happen next. Now, in the example that I gave earlier, like somebody's treating me like crap at work, I understand that by de-escalating the situation, there's only so many outcomes that can happen. Um, they could make a fool of themselves, but I'm also keeping myself in a positive light and everybody else's viewpoint at work, so I'm not going to get in near as much trouble. Even if I did get in trouble, I can make the argument that I didn't, that I was maintaining my calm. I can already predict all of these things that I would do afterwards because I understand the choice that I've made, so I can see beyond it. But what if somebody does something or somebody says something to me at work that I haven't made a choice about? I don't understand what I'm doing. I can't predict what's coming next. So how we plan out our day and how we live our lives is, and how well we can see into the future is predicated on the idea that we understand the choices that we're making. And of course, how much we understand nature and the laws of just natural law in general, and the fixed, immutable parts of natural law, and how in tune we are with that. We can see very far into the future. But if we haven't taken the time to know ourselves at all and not understand our choices at all, life will appear to be a series of curveballs that are constantly throwing us for a loop. But really, that's because of our own complete lack of self-responsibility and not taking responsibility for how well our senses have been refined to achieve knowledge, how efficient our thinking is, how well we manage our emotions and use them and respond to them in a healthy way, how clearly we listen to our intuitions. These are all things that are in our side of the court for us to deal with. So at this point, Neo questions the Oracle. Why didn't she reveal to him that he was the one?
What choice?
It doesn't matter. It's my choice. I have mine to make, same as you have yours.
Does that include what things to tell me and what not to tell me?
Of course not.
Then why didn't you tell me about the architect? Why didn't you tell me about Zion and the ones before me? Why didn't you tell me the truth?
Why keep that a secret? And she said it wasn't time yet. And he got pretty upset with that and says, who decides what's the right time? And she says, you know who. And he knew that it was him.
Because it wasn't time for you to know.
Who decided it wasn't time?
You know who.
I did.
He did not want to know. He did not want to accept the fact that he was the one, whatever that means. No different than in the first movie when he comes out of the Matrix and he's literally puking because it's so hard to accept. Morpheus even makes the comment that they don't like taking out people that are older than a certain age because they've made up their mind to the point where it's too much and it could kill them. So there is this level of acceptance of the truth, whatever that may be, whatever is coming your way. And if someone chooses to ignore the truth or ignore the facts, ignore the data, there's nothing anyone can do to convince them otherwise. And really, and this comes to an interesting point, whether someone is lying to you or whether someone is telling you the truth, the onus is on the person who's receiving that lie or receiving that truth to accept it or reject it. And really, if they haven't taken the time to refine their thinking, their ability to detect lies, isn't part of the blame on the person receiving the lie? And a lot of people might find this to be unfair or just not fair. But you know what? That was in your control. And yeah, there's a lot of things going on, but taking responsibility for what you can do is going to be what really improves your life. That's what you can do. And that's very important here, and I think that the Oracle makes that distinction quite well. Because we're all, on certain levels, not willing to accept certain truths, and we are our own worst enemies in that way. Neo wouldn't have had to go through that struggle, go through that rite of passage, had he been willing to just accept the truth. And we are like that in many ways. There was a book written by K.M. Weiland called Creating Character Arcs. And she has a fascinating point of view where there's only so many character arcs that can take place. There's very few, actually. And one of the main character arcs that is the most famous, perhaps, is the arc where the main character believes a lie, and their whole story is them accepting the truth and overcoming it, in which is the case for Neo in this circumstance. And once you accept the truth, your suffering ends. In fact, you know, I've heard Michael Tessarion say that suffering is just wisdom waiting to happen. You know, I'm not talking about pain, you know, when you get cut or something like that. I'm talking about this ongoing suffering that takes place is just a message that's waiting to be understood. And I would make the argument that more often than not, this suffering is a result of not accepting certain truths. It goes back to the classical Buddhist viewpoint of attachment is the root of all suffering. There is a lot of truth to that. And I think the case is being expressed pretty clearly in this movie as well, in The Matrix. So interestingly, the Oracle mentions that the architect cannot see past any choice. So the architect is like the builder of the Matrix.
The architect told me that if I didn't return to the source, Zion would be destroyed by midnight tonight.
Please. You and I may not be able to see beyond our own choices, but that man can't see past any choice.
Why not?
He doesn't understand them. He can't. To him, they are variables in an equation. One at a time, each variable must be solved and counted. That's his purpose, to balance the equation.
And he just balances the equation. He's purely logical, and that's it. He doesn't use intuition or emotion or anything of the sort. It sort of reminds me of William Blake's Urizen, and how Urizen was stuck in, you know, just reason alone. It was an anagram for reason. And there was always something flawed in Urizen's world, much in the same way that the architect's world was flawed. And if you've watched the Matrix Trilogy, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The Matrix had been created several times, and he even tried to make it perfect, quote unquote. And even when the people in the Matrix had everything they wanted and needed, it still devolved into a mess. So I thought that was very interesting that this architect character could not understand any of the choices he was making. And if you're just stuck in thought, if you don't include intuition and emotion and your senses, you'll be stuck as well. You won't be able to understand what's going on within yourself or the world around you. So that about wraps it up in terms of what the Oracle had to say and some of the philosophical value within the Matrix trilogy and this very influential character in the process. I've really enjoyed trying to understand what her message was and wrapping my mind around it and sharing it with whoever was willing to watch this video. So thank you. Have a nice day.